Hello everyone, I'm Mr. Jake from the Phillips Public Library, and I'm bringing you a special story time to celebrate and honor all of our veterans because this Friday, November 11th, is Veterans Day. A brief history of Veterans Day actually goes back to the ending of World War I. World War I was known as the war to end all wars, and unfortunately, 40 million people gave their lives to the conflict. It went from 1914 until 1918, and when the peace treaties were signed, they decided that they would make a ceremony on the 11th day of the 11th month at the 11th hour. November 11th became known internationally as Armistice Day. Years later, in the United States, the same day would be called Veterans Day. And to celebrate and commemorate the day, I'm going to be reading A Meeting in the Sky. It's a book that is based on a true story of World War II in the 1940s. And it is by Rina Singh and Jordi Vila Delclos. It's a true story. I hope you enjoy it. A Meeting in the Sky by Rina Singh, illustrated by Jordi Vila Delclos. The farm boy lived in America. One day, a famous airplane company stopped in a town near his farm, offering plane rides to people for a fee. But the boy was poor, so he gazed at the plane from the edge of the crowd. When it took off, he ran after it, flapping his arms, pretending to fly. The pilots were amused, so they offered him a free ride. The boy flew over fields and forests. He flew over the family farm. From high up, all of the houses looked like toys. The forest beneath was a blur, and he wanted to reach out and touch the clouds. In that moment, a dream was born. Even though his mother wanted him to become a priest, the boy followed on his own path. He grew up to become a pilot in the Air Force. The city boy lived in Germany. He would run from his house at the sound of an airplane to look up at it. His father was a pilot and owned a glider club. The boy chased the soaring wooden gliders when the pilots took off into the sky. When he turned 12, his father strapped him into the seat of one and hauled him up the hill to launch his flight. But instead of gradually taking off, the glider went up like a rocket as his father watched in horror. "Push forward!" he shouted. When the boy pushed, the glider nosedived into the ground. He crashed his first flight, but survived. The glider was not built for the slight weight of the boy. A few months later, he took to the skies again, with a sandbag tied around his waist. The brother told him to follow the eagles. They knew where the good wind was. And this time the boy was whisked off into the air. He flew over hills and rivers, touching clouds. "I want to fly every day," he told his father as soon as he touched the ground. The city boy grew up and became an airline pilot, flying passengers from one place to another. One day the world went to war. Many countries fought the war over land, on sea, and in the sky. The farm boy and the city boy became soldiers of the sky. The war made them enemies. The war made a big mess of the world. A few days before Christmas, the American pilot on a combat mission flew a fierce plane to bomb the cities of the enemy. He dodged and weaved in the sky as the sky lit up with gunfire. Bullets made big holes in his plane, and one of the engines died. The bomber's nose was gone, and the radio room was blown apart. The guns froze, and without one of the engines, the plane slowed down. The other planes in his formation left him behind. He flew alone. That's when the American pilot saw the enemy's plane on his tail. It was the German pilot. He had seen damaged planes return from battle. But this he had never seen. A plane so beat up that he wondered how it could still be flying. Shooting it down would win him his country's highest medal. He flew closer and looked through the ripped frame. He saw wounded men huddled together. protecting each other. He thought of his own brother he had lost in the war and wondered what he would have done. He remembered his father's words, "Always do the right thing, even when no one is looking." For a moment, he forgot he was a fighter pilot. He made a decision that could ruin him. The German pilot flew his plane side by side with the enemy and forced him to turn his plane in another direction, towards the sea. The American pilot froze in fear. He felt he was living in a nightmare. Where were they heading? Why didn't the German pilot shoot them? What was he waiting for? The German pilot then flew his little plane beneath the big one to protect it from the guns on the ground. They were still in German territory. The American pilot was too stunned to realize that he was being steered to safety. Before they reached the sea, both planes flew side by side one more time. And when the American pilot looked out of the cockpit window, he saw the German pilot. The German pilot raised his hand to salute and turn back. The American pilot, still in shock, flew his crippled plane over the sea and landed safely back on the other side. The war went on for 2 more years, ravaging countries and destroying lives. And then it was over. Both pilots went home. They married, had children, and grew older. But they never forgot their secret meeting in the sky. Almost 45 years passed. The German pilot thought of the secret encounter every single day. For many years he searched for the pilot whose life he had spared, always wondering, was it worth it? What happened to the American pilot and his crew? Did they live or crash into the sea? The American pilot suffered from nightmares, and the image of his enemy's salute was frozen in his mind. Why had he let them go? Was he out of ammunition? Or was he just a good man? He too searched for the unknown German pilot for many years. He decided to put an advertisement in a German war magazine for former pilots. In it, he mentioned the place, the time, and some details of the encounter. He also wrote his address where he could be reached. Many months later, he found a letter in the mail with foreign stamps. It was from Canada. Dear C, I was the one. All these years, I wondered what happened to you and your plane. I wanted to know if you were able to save your crew. I tried to find you, but without any luck. I am happy now that you made it, and it was worth taking the risk. Yours truly, F. Disbelief turned into excitement. The American pilot invited the German pilot for a meeting. When they came face to face, they looked at each other for a long time. The German pilot raised his hand to salute the American pilot, just like he had done in the sky. They hugged each other and cried. The enemies became friends, friends for life. 2 boys, 2 continents, 1 dream to fly. Well, that is quite the remarkable and true story. It took those 2 men 46 years to track each other down. And when they did, they put aside their differences, and they were no longer enemies. They looked at each other as equals. And I think that there's a lot to that story that everybody can take something from. Well, reading this story reminded me of the awful, cold, brutal conditions that those airmen had to endure while they were having those dogfights high in the sky. Freezing temperatures were often a problem for the men on those planes. In fact, it was such a problem that they had special gloves that were made. These are the kind of gloves that the gunners would have wore. And you'll notice, unlike a regular mitten, they have a special finger, and that is the trigger finger, so they could operate the guns while staying warm in the freezing temperatures high in the sky. Well, I hope you enjoyed this story. It's a little bit of a history lesson, and thank you for taking some time to listen to it with me and to celebrate Veterans Day. To all the veterans that are living and all the ones that have fallen, we thank you for your service, And happy Veterans Day from my family to yours, and from the Phillips Public Library to that of the community. Thanks again. Happy Veterans Day. Signing off.